The Path magazine, published in 1886 by the Theosophical Society. The Society of the Rosicrucians. The following are, in numerical outline, the fundamental doctrines of the Brothers of the Rosy Cross. He who fulfills the required conditions may find all necessary information in the quote, Book of Initiation, end quote. And they say that when he is ready, he finds with ease a guide through his higher self, who instructs and directs him infallibly. It is understood that the Society desires to be truly spiritual and asks no fees or payment, but it seeks as members only those who are practical workers in the cause of humanity. But it is a secret body, not from fear of enemies, but in order to spread the truth unimpeded by the war of opinions. The truth being eternal is not subject to opinion, but to those who are able to see it stands revealed in its own light. 1. The universe as a whole is a unity, having only one eternal universal and fundamental cause for its existence. All the multifarious forms, essences, powers, or principles are not originally self-existent, but are merely various manifestations of that one and universal cause. There are various modes of one original activity, and their shapes or organisms are the products of that activity, working upon different planes of existence and in various stages of evolution. 2. This cause, being eternal, unlimited, and infinite, is beyond the power of the intellectual comprehension of any mortal and limited being. Its presence may be perceived everywhere, but in its highest aspect it can fully be known only to itself. Beings lower than itself may intuitively feel its presence, but cannot intellectually know it until they have risen up to its own level on the plane of existence. To avoid circumlocution, we call that eternal spiritual principle in its highest aspect, quote, God, or quote, Brahm, both words signifying originally good. In this eternal and universal cause, the center or fountain of all, is contained potentially everything existing in the universe. It is itself germinally or in a more or less developed state contained in everything that exists. It forms the spiritual center of every living organism, and life itself is only a mode of manifestation of its own power. It is the cause and the architect of every form. It builds the form which it inhabits from that center, by the power of its own consciously or unconsciously active will and thought, and by the means offered by eternal nature, the latter being itself a product of previous states of its own existence and eternal action. The highest form of activity of this principle requires for its perfect expression perfect means. The perfect cannot manifest its perfection in an imperfect organism. The place which a being occupies on the ladder of evolution depends on the progress which that divine principle, acting in the center of each being, has made in evolving an organism adapted to its manifestation. 5. The most perfect organism for the manifestation of the divine and universal principle in its highest aspect, of which we know, is the spiritual organism of man. In this organism, this divine principle, after having attained sensation and consciousness in the lower forms of nature, may acquire spiritual self-consciousness and self-knowledge, evolving what is called the individual mind, with all its powers and faculties for spiritual perception and real knowledge or wisdom. 6. The ordinarily visible so-called physical body of man is not the real man, but merely a more or less imperfect representation of the real or the, quote, inner man, whose sphere of activity may extend as far as the sphere of his mind. In other words, as far as the power of his spiritual perception. The, quote, inner man is a reality, which after having attained by the power of self-differentiation an individual existence, will retain its individuality after the physical forms which it has occupied for the purposes of evolution during its life upon a planet have been disintegrated and changed into other forms. 7. Every being continues to exist in its essence after the physical form which expressed the essential character has dissolved and disappeared. But as long as it has not acquired spiritual self-consciousness and self-knowledge, it is forced, after a time of rest, to reappear in a new form, mask, or personality, to resume the process of its further development. After the divine principle in man has attained individual spiritual self-consciousness and self-knowledge, it requires no more embodiments in physical forms, and then may harmoniously unite with the all and continue to exist as a self-conscious intelligence. 8. The attainment of spiritual self-consciousness and self-knowledge and the necessarily resulting perfection therefore involves the attainment of immortality, and the latter can be only acquired by acquiring the former. Only that which is perfect remains. The imperfect is continually subject to change. 9. Although the individual human monad without spiritual self-consciousness and knowledge may arrive at that state of perfection in the slow course of its evolution, extending perhaps over many millions of years, nevertheless, there is no necessity to wait until nature may, perhaps slowly and unaided, accomplish her object, but she may be assisted by the individual will and effort of those who know how to proceed. 10. The first necessary requirement for all who desire perfection is therefore to know the laws that rule the visible and invisible universe, and the attainment of the knowledge involves a study of the constitution of the universe and of the constitution of the soul of man. 11. From knowledge springs power, but those who possess knowledge will be in the possession of something that will not benefit them unless they desire to put it into some practical use. The second requirement is therefore to will, and as an individual will, deviating from the direction of the will of the universal good, or acting in opposition to the latter, is evil, and can only bring final destruction upon him that exercises it. Consequently, the will of the individual must act in accordance with the universal will of God, or the universal will of good. 12. To act evil is for the majority of men far easier than to do good. Goodwill and desires to become useful must be made to accomplish some work. To overcome the resistance of evil and to put good into practice requires energy, courage, and effort. And the third necessary requirement is therefore to dare to practice the good which we know and desire. 13. But as a power, after it has once been obtained, may be employed for good or for evil purposes, and as it is not desirable that the persons with evil inclinations and tendencies should be taught the way to prolong their personal existence after the dissolution of their physical form, because their existence would cause the infliction of injury upon others and expose themselves to a long and slow as well as painful final disintegration. Therefore, the deepest secrets of the Rosicrucians and the way to the practical application of the secret knowledge should be taught only to those who are good and pure, to a degree sufficient to warrant the mysteries communicated and revealed to them may not be misapplied. The fourth necessary requirement for the Rosicrucian is therefore to be silent in regard to that which is not expedient to speak. And that concludes the article from the Path magazine on the Rosicrucianists. Please make sure that you watch the playlist that I've created on the Path magazine for more articles in the future. Until the next time, always remember, love yourself and love each other unconditionally.